A very good day to our beloved lecturer for the subject of curriculum studies, Mr. George Arimput Ambayan. I am Izzati Ikisari binti Kushairi, the TESOL student PDPP, and today I would like to present the last presentation of the coursework task 3. So this oral presentation requests me to provide around 30 minutes of oral presentation on the principles in ELT syllabus design, which focus on sequencing of the content and the tasks and recycling of the content and the tasks in preparing the syllabus design for the English learning and teaching. So basically, the presentation will start with the introduction to the principle of ELT syllabus design, and I will move on to the sequencing of content and tasks in the English learning and teaching syllabus design, and recycling of content and tasks in designing of ELT syllabus design. I will end the presentation with a conclusion and will provide also several references. Let's move on. In the introduction to the principle of ELT syllabus design, where in this it is more on the task-based syllabus, where in the language teaching, most of the community among teacher and students argue for an analytical syllabus based on what is known about the processes of the second language learning. So it is very important that they understand the natural sequence to that really do not really exist in a sufficient detail to be used as the basis for a precise order, nor have they been shown to facilitate learning in a second language situation. However, there is also no consensus over any of them, as sequencing the tasks appear to be an arbitrary process, where at the end it is left partly to the judgment by the classroom teacher. So when we talk about sequencing of content and the tasks in designing the ELT syllabus, we have to focus more on the complexity of the task itself. So when we talk about complexity, it is how we identify any possible sources of the task. Complexity is a prerequisite for making principal decisions in sequencing of tasks. The rationale for investigating the task complexity spring from the need to establish a criteria for sequencing tasks in the syllabus. So the task complexity here focusedly result of the intentional memory, reasoning, and other information processing demand imposed by the structure of the task of the language learner, and the task difficulty in sequencing the content and the tasks refer to the factor relating to the learners as individuals, which can influence how easy or difficult a particular task is for different participants. These factors include the learner's intelligence, language ability, learning style, memory capacity, and motivation. So, there are several factors to determine the complexity of a task in order to make it is relevant to sequence the content and the task in designing the English learning and teaching syllabus. There are three main criteria in order to determine the complexity, which are linguistic criteria, cognitive criteria, and dialogical criteria. Okay, when we talk about the first criteria, which is linguistic variables or linguistic criteria, it is grammatical complexity in which determining the complexity of what the learners have to do, which influence the task complexity. Such a some of the example of the grammatical complexity, such as the length of the text, the comprehension quotient, the amount of a low frequency vocabulary, the speed of spoken text, the explicitness or the clarity of the information, the discourse structure, the clarity with which this is signaled, and the genre of text, language related variables. And the second criteria in determining the complexity of the task is the cognitive process or the cognitive criteria. This is also known as the psycholinguistic variables, where they are concerned with cognitive processes involved in the accomplishment of language learning tasks. So, um, the in order to measure the cognitive complexity is by identified several things, such as the information provided in the task, the reasoning needed, the precision needed, the familiarity with the constraint, and the degree of abstractness uh, in the task created in the syllabus. And and moving on, continuing of the second criteria, still the cognitive process. The complexity of what the learners have to do is determined by such factors such as relevance, complexity, and amount of context provided prior to the task. When we talk about relevance, is the task given is meaningful and relevant to the learner. And talking about complexity, how many steps are involved in the task? Is it complete step, or did you skip the step, and whatsoever? And the amount of the context provided prior to the task is how much prior knowledge of the world is provided before the student able to answer the task with what they learned before. So, cognitive criteria or cognitive process is a procedural factors involved in the task performance, can also influence the mental processes required for accomplishing a given task. The tasks like here and now, that requiring reference to the there and then, and comparing also to the task that is with close outcomes, will be easier to accomplish, as the participant knows that there is only one correct answer, like he or she can direct like his or her. So the effort of answering the task given must be more purposefully. And psycholinguistic processing approach, in which tasks are sequenced based on the cognitive and performance demands made upon the learner. This approach requires learners to undertake activities which become increasingly demanding, and moving for the comprehension-based activities to a more controlled production of activities and exercises, and finally to activities involving more authentic communicative interaction. Okay, the third or the last criteria in order to identify the level of task complexity in sequencing the content and tasks in moving on to the last criteria, in order to view the task complexity, in order to sequence of content and tasks in designing the syllabus, English learning and teaching syllabus. Um, the last one is the uh, dialogical issues or dialogical criteria. So it is believed that the learning takes place through social activity, and social factors influencing learning can be employed in task sequencing in preparing language instructional material as well. So amount of help available to the learners, such as the question that trigger, um, for instance, how much assistance can the learner get from the teacher, other learners, books, or other learning aids? In this case of interactive tasks, it is the intercalator sympathetic. Does he or she provide help? So all these kind of uh, questions in the social context really influence the level of the task complexity in sequencing the content and the tasks in the designing of the English learning and teaching syllabus. So basically there are three basic phases in sequencing the content and the tasks in designing the English learning and teaching syllabus. The first task is a pre-task phase. The second task is a task proper phase, and the last phase is the follow-up phase. So a pre-task is not a demonstration, but as a task in in its own right. The teachers as mediation is the pre-task. In the pre-task phase, enables the learners to accomplish the task first with the teacher's intervention and then on his own. There is a movement from the interpersonal or social plane to the intrapersonal or focus on the individual plane. In a one-way configuration, all of the information related to the task is given to one learner who must communicate it to the other. Um, in a two-way configuration, the information related to the task is distributed among all of the learners who must share and integrate it. One-way tasks promote less negotiation of meaning than two-way tasks. In the other words, the word exists in other people's mouth, in other people's context, serving other people's attention. It is from there that one must take the word and make it one's own. So this implies that tasks can be sequenced from a dialogical perspective, and that is to say that tasks involving dialogues should precede those involving monologues. In other words, during these dialogical processes, two-way tasks are expected to appear prior to the one-way tasks. Okay, moving on to the second part of the presentation, which is recycling of content and tasks in designing of ELT syllabus design. They are able to identify there are three influential factors in determining the criteria to recycle of content and tasks in designing ELT syllabus, which are the individual factors, including learners and the teachers, educational factors, and cultural factors. Okay, in when we try to recycling the content and the tasks in designing the syllabus, we are going to focus on individual factors. Uh, Individuals here means learners and teachers. And viewing from learners and teachers, we are seeing them in terms of their motivation, attitude, learning styles, intelligence, and also the age. So these are the five factors that one can view in order to recycle the content and the task in designing the syllabus. And the second factors, or when you recycling of content and tasks, is the educational factors itself. As we know, philosophies underlying education into four main groups affecting curriculum. They are perennialism, that emphasize on classical subjects and literary analysis. Essentialism emphasizes on intellectual growth. Progressivism and reconstructivism based on pragmatism. And this all these three aims at a democratic social living and reconstructing society respectively. So regardless whatever the philosophies introduce or emphasize, they still consider teachers as guiders and leaders. It can be argued that educational system based on perennialism may grade and sequence tasks on the basis of linguistic variables. Likewise, essentialism, with its emphasis on intellectual growth, may lead to prioritizing of psycholinguistic variables. And at the same time, educational system based on progressivism and reconstructivism, with their uh, pragmatism emphasize more on social aspect, may give priority to dialogical issues in recycling tasks. So all these philosophies under the educational factors, things that as teacher should really viewed in recycling of content and tasks in designing the English language and teaching syllabus. And of course, the last factors is the cultural factors itself. As you know, that intelligences grow independently from each other, and that they are influenced by cultural factors to the point that cultures determine the type of intelligence to be fostered in a society. The idea that teaching activities used in a curriculum are teachers, educational philosophies, and teaching style. And only verbal linguistic and logical mathematical intelligences are dealt within schools to the negligence of other types of intelligences. So this may imply that the linguistics complexity and psycholinguistic variables are mainly focused on recycling content and tasks in designing the English learning and teaching syllabus. Um, so, in conclusion, um, until today, it is often argued that learners are unreally unrealistically assume to learn what teachers choose to teach them, leaving no room for individuals' differences. We can, however, make a distinction between overt behavior, what a learner appear to be doing, and covert learning process that are not easy to observe. So, meaning that there is no syllabus of generalized tasks can identify or anticipate all the sources of challenge to a particular learners. So, either it's sequencing the task or recycling the task um, in order to create the content that is suitable in designing the English and learning teaching syllabus. The task must be more intuitively in accordance with the general assessment or the task complexity. As I mentioned before, the concerning of the significance of judgment of the classroom teachers. So, in a nutshell, it can be argued that sequencing tasks, recycling the tasks, call for what calls the teacher's sense of plausibility. However, to come out with a better sequencing or recycling of tasks um, in designing the ELT syllabus, um, teachers and other stakeholders should take into account the learner's characteristic as well as educational and cultural issues and select the criterion for task sequencing accordingly. So by doing this, we can create a good syllabus focusing on the uh, English learning and teaching. So that's all from me. Thank you, Mr. George, for your time to listen to my presentation. Have a nice day. Thank you once again.